All right. Hello and welcome to the Killing Time with Arch podcast, the show where you get to learn more about your favorite and future favorite TikTok creators. My guest on the show today is a TikTok friend who goes by the handle Mary Clifton, MD. Dr. Clifton is a board certified licensed internal medicine doctor and a best-selling author, consultant, expert, and speaker on the impacts and applications of CBD and cannabis. She's also the founder of the professional certification course, the Cannabinoid Protocol, and the best-selling author of The Grass is Greener, Medical Marijuana, THC, and CBD Oil, Reversing Chronic Pain, Inflammation, and Disease, and the book Get Wasted, as well as 5 companion cookbooks. So join me in just a moment as I talk with her about some of those things and much more from my studio in Dayton, Ohio, the Gem City. So thank you so much for coming on the show and welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. We've been friends forever on TikTok, haven't we?
It has. It's been a while now. So yeah. And your page is blown up there. I love watching your videos there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I devoted a lot of time to it for a long time and then, didn't quite watch the trends as closely and sort of settled into my own program with news and research. I've really enjoyed building that page. TikTok is great.
It is. It's a lot of fun. Well, to start off, you're a speaker on a range of topics, but I'm particularly interested in how you became known for talking about cannabis because, I've seen your TikTok videos and you're not shy about the topic, obviously, and that's kind of rare. Still for medical doctors, it seems. So what got you into studying and talking about weed in the first place, I guess?
Yeah, really. What did, it was coming up to on 8 or 9 years ago that my brother died and had a very difficult death. And I, as the medical person in a family of, engineers and real estate people, they wanted me to handle the bedside work. And I couldn't get anything under control. Like, he was having a lot of problems with the process. And he had just a lot of breakthrough anxiety. And I thought, I wish that there was something more I could do. I had all of my, standard medical care at my fingertips. And then a few months later, one of my patients had recurrent ovarian cancer and was dying at about the same age that my brother died, 56. And then with her symptoms were entirely controlled almost completely up until just about the last, few days, and almost entirely controlled on cannabis. And and this wasn't the first time that a patient has come to me and said that their symptoms are significantly improved on cannabis. But boy, it was the first time I really listened and
Mhm.
thought about what a difference it might have made. And I sure wish that I would have had cannabis and maybe even some psilocybins for Tim. But
Sure.
having them for this patient really got me thinking. And then I love to read and research, obviously. I mean, I went to medical school. I don't want to know the superficial about anything and then just jump in. I want to know all the details. So I started researching, and then that led to the 300 researched educational videos on CBD and cannabisinfo.com. And then when TikTok opened, I started to do these short form videos. So I think I have, 3,000 videos there.
Wow.
And yeah. And
That's a
then I
lot.
a beautiful audience of email listener or email followers, now up to 46,000. And I'm starting my own card company, just really going all in on helping people get cannabis for low uniform pricing around the country.
That's so cool. And I definitely want to talk more about that a little bit later. But first, maybe as we record this, I'm in Ohio and we are just here a couple days out from having recreational weed become legal. So I'm curious, what should we expect in terms of things like availability or cost or other changes maybe that you've seen in other states that went recreational? And I'm going to go ahead and medicate us, in celebration of that. So
That's
please,
fine
go.
with me. I hope I'm not making you anxious. I hope you're
No,
just
no, no, it's just morning, so.
yeah. The recreational states typically, tax the recreational consumer at a little higher rate. So the medical cards will still function almost like a coupon every time you go to the dispensary. They're going
Mhm.
to give you, somewhere between 10 and in some states as much as 30% off. They may
Oh,
give
wow.
you an opportunity to cultivate if you're interested in growing your own, but a lot of states really try to prevent home grow because they want all the purchasing to go through the dispensary. And
Right.
yeah, and home grow is thwarted everywhere, unfortunately. Or they say that they do home grow, and then you have to live in an industrial park, and you have to have 12-foot fences, and they just make it impossible to do home grow.
Right. I
So
will be curious to see what happens here because they did include that in the legislation, but it was a voter initiative, and our legislature is not very happy about it. So,
no, they'll allow it for a while, but they'll probably start reining it in when nobody's looking. They tag it onto something else, and then before you know it, your home grow opportunities have gone away. So, so yeah, that I would expect that still having a medical card in your state is going to add that value of saving money and possibly allowing for cultivation. Also allows for a higher level of possession because in a lot of cases, a medical patient has, some limitations to getting to the dispensary if they have a disability, and then they go and they need to kind of stock up and then drive it home. And God
right.
forbid they stock up, drive home, and then get pulled over, and they're at a possession level that would put them in the range of being like a dealer. So
Right.
the possession levels are always higher with a medical patient. But I'm
Okay.
thrilled that Ohio got recreational. I'm thrilled about it. It's a huge opportunity for taxation, and then those taxes will, I mean, they never are, but they could potentially be turned into better schools or better roads, or but
Right.
it's good for the state, especially after all of the cost burdens of the pandemic and everything else that we've gone through recently that have burned through a lot of tax dollars.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it makes total sense. So,
Yeah.
um, well, I'm wondering maybe as a physician, you could share some of the maybe success stories that you've had working with people and helping with THC medication and things like that. And I know too that you talk sometimes about how CBD and cannabis can give you top performance. So maybe you could touch on that as well.
Oh, yeah. I love to help people get off their other medications with cannabis. I mean, almost immediately, what immediately comes to mind is medications for treatment of things like depression, anxiety, insomnia. A lot of people find that a 5 milligram or 10 milligram gummy before they go to bed is just marvelous for helping them fall asleep, and using the same level of dosing for anxiety or for depression. And the nice thing about it is, if you're taking an antidepressant from the pharmaceutical and you end up having a pretty good day, you've had a pretty good week, you've been eating, you're exercising, you're, taking care of yourself, you may not feel like you need your antidepressant pill. But if you don't take it, you feel awful. You have all that weird shakiness and you just feel awful. So,
Right.
so the nice thing about using cannabis is if you're having a Monday, you can use 3 or 4 times. Or if you're having a really great Thursday, you can skip it and just not
Yeah.
take any medicine. There's no withdrawal. There's no shakes. There's, the cannabis addiction syndrome is still really called into question by a number of experts as not even being a real problem. That
Mhm.
it's, things that are desirable, people will do again. But cannabis as an addiction and needing, where somebody is going to go steal money or break into somebody's home or something for more cannabis. This is not the addiction syndrome that we're talking about when we're talking about meth or the opioids or all of the other really dangerous products that people
Right.
use for
Right.
managing. Yeah.
They might raid your snack cabinet, but they're not going to.
Yeah, they might raid the cookie jar.
At least me. So, well, you touched on a little bit of a question I had because I do I have depression and anxiety, but my depression is bipolar depression, and I'm bipolar one, and so I have found that it's helpful for me both in my manic and depressed states for different reasons. And so, but I'm curious, maybe if you could talk about maybe mental health a bit, and if there's been research, because it seems like there's a lot of conflicting information out there, or debate. Maybe I don't know what the best way is to phrase it about marijuana and bipolar or other perhaps mental health issues.
Yeah, or even more serious mental health issues like schizophrenia or psychosis that many people say is brought on by cannabis. We really, now know that a lot of, I mean, if people have a psychotic break, for example, if they just lose their minds when they're on cannabis, that's oftentimes something that was in the process of happening anyway. And
Hmm.
most of the time, when you talk to somebody who's had a psychotic break with, cannabis, they will tell you that they were already hearing things, they were already seeing things when they were tired or when they were stressed, and then it just sort of blossomed when they were using cannabis. And if you look at the statistics from people who have been admitted to psych wards with acute breaks, then those people are that can happen from too much tobacco, even from too much caffeine, or from alcohol, or obviously other stronger drugs, or cannabis. Cannabis really is not a standout leader for a product that causes psychiatric problems. And actually now there's people studying the use of cannabis to control schizophrenia.
Oh, really?
So
Interesting.
it's really a different world. I've got a little cold and I'm just sort of, I sound like I have a frog in my throat.
No worries.
But also for depression, for anxiety, we use the same drugs. They're classified as antidepressants. But depression and anxiety comes from the same root in the brain, these neurotransmitter depletions where you don't have enough serotonin or enough dopamine, and you just don't have enough of those feel good chemicals in your brain. But in some people that leads to a lot of anxiety, and in other people that leads to a lot of depression. But so we use the same medications to get the same results. But cannabis works the same way in the brain. So using cannabis or CBD to manage those conditions makes a lot of sense if you're interested in doing a natural product and you don't
Sure.
want to take your antidepressants. But I'm routinely putting people on cannabis, and then they come back and they stopped 3 meds. They stopped 6 meds. I had
Mhm.
one patient stop 12 meds after
Wow,
starting cannabis. Yeah,
that's
amazing,
great.
isn't it?
Yeah,
This was like a different person at the end of that.
yeah. Well, that's one other question I guess I have too is, do you typically is the goal to try to get people off those medications, or are there medications? I mean, obviously there's some that, weed is not going to help. And so are there adverse reactions or things that need to be watched out for in particular illnesses or medications or things like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, weed is not for everybody. And, it's somewhere around 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people will say, I don't like it. It didn't work. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. But it can handle a lot of things as far as antidepressants and pain management, especially if the pain is neuropathic pain, numbness
Mhm.
or tingling in the feet, or back pain that is causing shooting pain down the legs. That type of neuropathic pain is very responsive
Mhm.
to cannabis, based on the research we have, mostly coming out of Israel. But there's really a limited amount of drug interactions.
Mhm.
If you think about it goes through the liver. It goes through the same enzyme system, the P450 enzyme system in the liver, that a lot of drugs go through. But it's a very smooth highway. And cannabis doesn't roll in there like a great big semi truck going 30 miles an hour and block up traffic. It just goes in there and gets metabolized along with everything else. So there's very, very little backup or disruption that you can associate with cannabis. You may have a little issue with blood thinners, but blood thinners are
Mhm.
so tricky. So if you're on blood thinners, you should tell your doctor if you sneeze if you're on a blood thinner.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, I guess that leads into another question I wanted to ask, which is about kind of how it gets in there, right? And so people like me maybe who smoke tobacco and weed, I guess sometimes other people I've talked to, it seems like there's a tendency of us to think like, well, weed is okay, better or somehow better on our lungs than tobacco, or not as bad, I guess I should say. And I
Mhm.
wonder if there's any truth to that, or like is there a safest way and worst way to consume cannabis in terms of your own long-term health?
Well, I mean, I think if you're looking for the absolute safest consumption, you would either want to consider an edible, which is going to keep any smoke out of your lungs, or you might want to consider a dry herb vape, like the PAX system, because the PAX system heats, it basically toasts. It toasts the weed,
Okay,
the herb instead of burning it. When you burn
gotcha.
it, you release 88 carcinogens. When you
Mhm.
toast it, you release 8 carcinogens.
Oh
So it
wow.
really is like 10% of the carcinogen exposure. But it changes the flavor, it changes the vibe of the whole thing. But those little PAX systems are sure, nifty, and slick. They're
Yeah.
really neat, and they're that now that those devices are around and they're safer. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who still like to roll up a cannabis cigarette, a joint, and smoke it that way, or they really prefer their pipe. But those little devices are just great, and they work also for different concentrates that you might use.
Gotcha.
Tobacco, I mean, weed just has cannabis just has a different risk because you're not, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, you're taking 180 inhalations of tobacco, right? But even if you're a heavy pot smoker, you might only smoke, you know, 8 inhalations a day. People
Mhm.
just aren't smoking, 200 inhalations a day of cannabis. So
Right.
the risk is really different. So even if you're
Gotcha.
not using one of these fancy gadgets, the risk is just totally different. And in the US, we've done these marvelous twin studies. We had all of these twins that we followed over their lifetime, and they
Mhm.
have identical genetics, but one of them smokes and the other one doesn't. And, we have not been able to show that the weed is in any way associated with more problems with bronchitis or COPD or lung disease as you get older. And just because
Interesting.
tobacco is inflammatory, the stuff in the tobacco is inflammatory, but the stuff in weed is anti-inflammatory. So
Okay.
you're not driving inflammation by using cannabis. So it's a totally different experience for your lungs.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do the longer term studies ever look at mental health or things like dementia, or whether it's helpful or harmful in that regard?
Well, there is some new research that ADHD, if it's not controlled, will lead to earlier onset dementia. And so, if you do have ADHD as a kid, I used to think, somewhat foolishly, that you just grew out of it.
Mhm.
But then it became clear that adult ADHD is a thing, that these kids with ADHD just turn into grown-ups with ADHD. And,
Right.
uh, and not that that's as not that that's a super serious thing, because you can oftentimes correct your career path and really do well with it. But if you find that you need to concentrate and you need help with your concentration, so many of my patients use cannabis or the hemp derived D8 with
Mhm.
excellent results. So
I'm Yeah, could you talk about the difference between those maybe for a second too? Because I hear about it a lot, and I know that I've, had both, but I don't
yeah.
know that I could really explain the difference very well.
Well, have you ever had hashish or hash? from way
Yes.
back when somebody, which is basically a fermented, I mean, there's multiple different ways to make it, but it's basically fermented flour. And over
Oh,
time, done properly, what it does is concentrate the D8. It flips the bonds from there's a double bond up at the top of the big circle. You know how if you look at a THC molecule, there's a circle and a bunch of other stuff coming off, like a tail coming off the circle. And at
right.
the top of that circle, there's a double bond between two carbons. What you're doing between D8 and D9 is just flipping that double bond over between two different carbons. And the fermentation process does that just by impacting the pH and changing the environment. You can just subtly change the molecule.
Mhm.
But what we do nowadays, because you can take CBD flower that's high in CBD and soak it in a strong acid, and it will flip that bond. And then you just do a distillation and distill off that acid, test it to make sure you got any residue out. There's other ways to do it, but that's the most common way to do it. And then you're basically making hash in, you know, an hour or two instead of
Mhm.
30 to 40 days. So you can
Gotcha.
get that same super chill vibe that you enjoy with hash with D8. Or you can just lace existing cannabis with D8, and it'll be like you used to do in high school, like putting a ribbon of hash in a joint.
Okay. Well, this must be where because my fiance and I were in Chicago recently, and we saw like a weed, infused bakery there, and we weren't sure whether what we got was real, true, truly THC, or was a Delta 8 kind of variant or something. And so I was always curious, but it did feel like I was kind of surprised by kind of the effect it had, I guess. So yeah, I was just kind of curious, how
And
that
it
works, or if
depends,
switching,
on if you're smoking it or if you're ingesting it, because ingesting it will metabolize the molecule a little differently through the liver and so you'll end up experiencing something that's a little bit more fatiguing or sedating for a lot
right.
of when you're using it that way. So yeah, it's always fun to go on an adventure like that. I had a patient go to Canada and eat a brownie, and he was high for 3 days. He unfortunately got into, it was early after Canada's, and they still really hadn't managed their edibles. And I think it might have been like a secondary market edible that was being sold in a primary market store. It was a little bit, the whole story was a bit of a mess, but all the best
Sounds
for
like it.
the entire. So I don't know if you're going to be, on vacation having an experience, just be careful. Be
Sure.
careful.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
great advice. Well, I that's a good segue perhaps into the fact that you have some cookbooks. So I'm wondering if you could talk about those a little bit. And
Oh yeah, I should have brought them over here. I have a couple of different books. I have Cannabis for Health that's available through Barnes and Noble and through Amazon. That's a really big, very comprehensive book for anybody who's thinking about starting to use cannabis and needs to know about some of the big names of the favorite products and exactly what is the difference between a bong and a pipe and a joint. And then I did The Grass is Greener, which is a bit more casual and sort of patient experienced based.
okay.
And then I have three cookbooks, like like a smoothie book and a dog treat cookbook and a infused meals like dinners cookbook,
Nice.
and we give those away to the email list.
Very cool.
Once in a while we'll just do a giveaway along with, if you buy something you can get it, or we just give it away to make sure that we want everybody to know how much fun we have and taking care of people and talking to people about this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I wonder if I'm going to see you maybe at some point on that. What's that Cooking with Cannabis show on Netflix? Are
Oh,
you? Because I
well,
love that show. That's
I'm
the
not really a necessarily a cooking with cannabis chef, you know. I mean, I'm a clinician, and I've been taking care of patients for 25 years now, and using I mean, that's really where my expertise is. I do love to cook and I do yoga and I love my dog, but my professional expertise is in clinical. So that's how
yeah,
Swifty Med came around because I did some cannabis education work, but education's really just not, there's so much free education available, you know, even
right.
through me, that it doesn't really make sense to make people pay for it. So, but needing a medical card, that's something that people are going to need everywhere for a very long time. So Swifty Med is going to offer, you know, cannabis cards at a low price, very easy to obtain. And we're in 10 states now. We're going to be in 14 states within just a couple of months. And our cards are going to be, we still haven't totally settled on the price, but we're going to be somewhere between $70 and $80,
Oh,
which
wow.
is, yeah,
That's
going
a
to
great
be,
deal. I know from I've had a medical card for several years now, and yeah, that's a great deal.
yeah, because you're probably paying what, 125 for your card?
I think so, yeah. And then
Yeah.
you have to get the registration fee, I think, and
Yeah. So it
so you
ends
end
up
up
being,
paying like $200 probably a year, I
oh,
think, is what I
wow.
calculated at some point. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so I like the idea of making it doesn't make any sense for the cards to be that expensive. I mean, there's really nothing else I do that takes the amount of time the card takes that I get paid that much for. And
sure,
so, yeah, so backing it off is going to still make it, you know, profitable enough and still provide a really good service to the community. And that's what I want to do. If we have strong medical programs with tens of thousands of people in them, then they flip to recreational programs, and then we've solved the problem of prohibition in our country.
right.
Everybody's just got to smoke.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for it. So, well, if people are interested in that, like myself, how can we find that and to
Well,
join
we're
this
not in
email list?
Ohio, but you should let me know who your doctor is, and I'll
Okay,
not now, but you know, but some
right.
other time, and then I'll see if I can recruit him because we're not in Ohio yet. But yeah, you can go to swiftymed.com, and you know, if we're not in your state, we'll collect the information and we'll be in your state as soon as we can.
That's great. I might have disappeared from the screen. Oh, okay. I think I'm
Nope,
back.
you're there. I love your background, by the way. Like
Oh,
my
thanks.
background is a little more, you know, just
Well,
it's
I love yours too. I love the contrast and everything, so it's great.
yeah.
Um, well, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before you head out?
No, I think we've covered it all. I did just want to talk to people a little bit about appetite, because you did bring up that comment that, you know, people will get into your raid your snack drawer and not
Right.
necessarily go steal money. But but you know, people who smoke cannabis over their lifetime actually have uh, lower body weights than people who don't.
Interesting.
There's this, you know, skinny hippie theory, but
Hmm.
they think that it mostly just it's an appetite modulator,
Hmm.
and so if you're having trouble with a lot of munchies, try dosing a little bit closer to your meal. Because a
Okay.
lot of my patients find that if they dose close to the meal, then they really enjoy every bite of food, but they're not really like overeating. If you
Right.
dose 2 hours before your meal, if you're having trouble eating, then there's
Mhm.
some people who have trouble eating because they're sick or because their appetites are low. Dosing 2 hours before and allowing that to stimulate your hunger is good. But, you know, I love dosing right before dinner because then you can relax and talk to your family and engage and just be calm, and then you know, and have a great dinner and not overeat, and then you'll be ready for bed. A couple hours later it'll wear off and you'll be like, whew, that was a fun night. Another day with my family.
Well, in the holiday season, I feel like is a great time to do that, and I feel also like weed will help me get through many of these holiday functions with families.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, yeah, I think that it's a great way to enjoy the food more and make it a little more tolerable sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely a great
Mhm.
thing to do for holiday events, and it's so much safer than alcohol, so much better for
Mhm.
you. So if you're working on, if you want to just simply have a relaxed day where you're a little intoxicated, you're so much better off with a little smoke as opposed to, getting into a day drinking experience that,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, with drinking 3 or 4 drinks, 5 or 6 drinks during the course of a day drinking experience, you're going to have a fatty liver the next day. Your
Right.
liver is accumulates a bunch of fat cells in it, and if you do that day after day after day, those fat areas turn into scar tissue. If you decide to smoke at the beginning of the day, and then you might do it once or twice again if you're having a daytime party experience, that's a totally different experience for your body.
Right.
So, yeah, you're right on track with holidays. I love the idea of using cannabis to get through, like, Thanksgiving dinner with
I
all the
mean,
craziness of Thanksgiving dinner.
well, I mean, in favor, like you said, I always thought it was funny because I've been a bouncer at a bar, and I would much rather be a bouncer at a bar for people just using weed than drinking a bunch of alcohol, and they're far better to deal
Oh,
with.
yeah.
So
It's
I just
so
always thought it hilarious that we somehow think that weed is more dangerous. It's just
or that
laughable, really.
alcohol gets this whole vibrational energy of, like, we're all hanging out, the gang is drinking. Like, whenever people are all drinking together, it's such a big ego trip, and everybody's
Hmm.
like, "Oh," it's there it doesn't bring out the best in so many people. It brings
Yeah.
they perceive themselves to be the best and the prettiest and the funniest, but from the external looking in, they just look awful. But
Hmm.
weed is really a community experience. You feel more engaged. You feel like all fingers on one hand. It doesn't create that ego elevation. And that's, I think, one of the best things, that you can see yourself as a member of a larger community and be, like, really engaged in a heartfelt way with the people you're hanging out with. And that'll extend your life and make your life a
Hmm.
better life to live.
Right. Well, I have to say, TikTok has been really helpful for that, despite how much it hates weed. It's been nice being a part of the 420 community on TikTok, and those are the people I would consider my closest friends on there. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely part of that, and I just like getting on and going live and playing music with people and hanging out, and it is just kind of that experience of just wanting to chill together. So I think that's definitely the appeal for me in many ways.
Yeah, the TikTok crowd is just the best. It
It
is.
is, yeah.
It's really fun. But I think they're allowing CBD to be sold on their TikTok shop. I'm going to try to get my CBD products on their TikTok shop.
That would be great. That would be a real turnaround for TikTok
I
if
know.
they did that. That'd be
If I
great.
could get that, would be so fun. And then I developed a highly concentrated CBD that has 4,000 units of CBD in just one little tincture jar. So
Mhm.
instead of taking, like, multiple dropperfuls, you can just take a quarter dropperful and you will be good.
Wow,
And then just some standard soft gels, little 100 milligram soft gels. But for
nice.
people who need to use a lot of CBD, it'll be a really nice product.
Sure, yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and I had other questions that many family members had about their specific ailments that I did not have time to get to, but I'll have to book an appointment.
Oh,
But
let's
thank you.
let's do another show. I'd love to do
Okay.
another show with you anytime.
Okay, great. Well, then definitely we could do that. So that would be even better. So. But I know you've got to get going, and I do too. And so I'll let you go. But I really appreciate you being on the show today and talking with me, and I definitely would love to have you back.
I really appreciate everything you do for the cannabis community. and
Oh,
for the situation in the Middle East. Your thoughts are very powerful, and it's a really important time for everybody to hear them.
well, thank you. Yeah, yeah, it's exciting to see things changing in terms of like you know people's views here. So that's
Yeah,
been probably the nicest part, or the hopeful part, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah, definitely tragic. So
can't hide the truth.
yeah, very true. So, but yes, so thank you again, and I'll definitely follow back up with you. And thanks for being on the show. Anyways, thank you so much to Dr. Mary Clifton for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and it was great having her on. You can find her on TikTok as Mary Clifton MD, and you can find her online at drmaryclifton.com. And it was great speaking with her and learning more about cannabis from a medical standpoint. So many thanks to her for coming on. For those of you who have listened in the past, I did want to let you know that I'm trying to do some more episodes of the show now and do so more consistently. So please be sure to keep tuning in and make sure you're subscribed through wherever you get your podcasts to the Killing Time with Arch from. And you can find me on TikTok as well at Gem City Dudeist Priest. Learn more about me and some of the other stuff I do at www.gemcitydudistpriest.com. Thank you so much for listening, and free Palestine. And I will see you guys back here next time.